Hello, I haven't done a video in a while because I've been over in America doing Contenders Season 1, and during that time span I also managed to miss pretty much everything else that was going on during autumn of 2017. So I thought I'd do a video kind of recapping because basically over the last month since I got back from Contenders Playoffs, I've just been watching VODs of the Korean teams, Chinese teams, some of the Pacific teams as well. So I thought I'd give a little recap for anybody who, like me, managed to miss what was going on around the world during the autumn of 2017 in terms of Overwatch. You know, like different regions that you don't really take that much note of, perhaps, even though they are relevant in the wider scene, and give you a bit of a flavor of what's been happening there. So since about late summer, say August time, we've had Apex Season 4, we've had the Premier Series happening over in China, both the summer and the Grand Finals, and then we've also had the Seoul Cup, which happened very recently, and I know a lot of people did watch that, because that was a super awesome kind of standalone tournament that combined two of the top teams from Korea, along with one of the top teams from China and one just rando team. I'll get into that later on. And then the Pacific Championship as well, which I know that I think of all of the tournaments that I'm going to talk about, the Pacific Championship probably gets the least viewership, but there are a couple of notable teams in there, so I think it's worth touching on as well. Actually, perhaps the one that gets the least is Apex Challengers, which in fact I've actually watched none of the VODs of, but I'm still just going to touch on just using the over.gg page for the tournament, just to give an idea of some of the teams that are kind of coming up and going to be in Apex next season, because a lot of the teams are going to be moving on. Some of them have got owl spots, some of them have disbanded, and so a bit like Contenders, Apex as the developing tier of tournaments underneath the Overwatch League is going to have a lot of shuffles, but we've seen that Challengers can be a great breeding ground for some of what are going to be the next best teams in the world, even if they're not going to be involved in OWL. So I think it does merit touching upon some of those Apex Challenger teams, including Element Mystic, who just managed to beat the South Korean team in some show match games that I'm sure people have watched, because people are fairly hyped about that on the Reddit. But I'm just going to go through these tournaments kind of one by one and bring them up on the screen for you guys. That is not supposed to happen. That's just supposed to be a fade stinger. Let's all forget that didn't happen and go on with the show. Okay. Okay, so this is... That's throwing me off. Okay, this is Apex Season 4. It's... Okay, so they were playing on the previous patch, kind of before the Junkrat buffs, and when Doomfist had a huge hitbox, as in his punch had a huge hitbox, not the character himself, up until September the 12th, and then they moved on to the new patch. It was actually the patch before that, because they'd already released this Mercy Diva patch by that time, I think, or it might have been September the 19th, actually. But basically, they've been playing on the Junkrat Double Mine Doomfist nerfed patch up until here, and all of these competitions have as well, apart from Apex Challenger, who, because they've just been playing online, not on the tournament client to my knowledge, have been playing on the live for the entire time. So the teams that have got really good in Apex Challenger have got a huge head start over everybody in terms of adapting to this new meta, which might potentially make them, at the moment, some of the best in the world, but I would expect other people to catch up as they start diving a little further into the meta. Anyway, Apex Season 4. So coming into it, it was there were a few people who were outstanding favorites. So Lunatic Eye, obviously two-time back-to-back world champions, the Dr. Disrespect of Overwatch, as Kara Hall loves to say. So these guys are phenomenal, obviously. They had a great style going into the end of Apex Season 3 that ended up with them winning the tournament. Very Sombra focus, kind of a slow play style. They're going to be able to get hacks onto your Diva and then work that into... So it was a slow tempo Sombra style, where they used Esker on the Sombra and then had Guido on the Tracer alongside him. They'd really moved away from dive and hadn't been running that since the group stages of Apex Season 3, and a lot of their teamwork was really based around a non-dive style, like a not even reactive. It was, well, I guess it's reactive. It's not a counter-punching style. It was very much a trying to get hacks, and if you couldn't, then you were going to try and envelop the enemy dive. Another favorite, of course, where are they? Kongdu Panthera. I was looking for Cloud9 Kongdu, but of course at the beginning of the season they were called Kongdu Panthera. They upgraded a couple of positions, I want to say. Badosin over Luffy is the notable upgrade. And then Birdring sat out for a couple of games early on in the season as they tried to integrate new DPS Curious into the mix, but he's taking a break now. No, not taking a break, actually. He's moved on completely to PUBG, which is a disappointment, actually, because he looked fairly good. But who else? Luxury Watch Blue. Also, I think they finished something like 5th to 6th last season, but that was because they got a slightly more difficult bracket and ended up coming up against Lunatic High, I believe, who knocked them out. And a couple of other teams as well were favoured. Having said that, the 3rd place team, Afrika Freaks Blue, was not, because they'd lost Mano and they were bringing in Breck and God, what's their diva's name? I'm just going to quickly look because I've completely forgotten his name. Kalios, of course. Kalios from WNV Korea instead of Donghyun. So they completely changed up their tank line, which was one of the strongest parts of Afrika Freaks. So they weren't expected to do as well. Runaway were very much mixing around at the beginning of the season, still really to find their form. They'd played in the Nexus Cup and lost to Miraculous Youngster twice, 2-0 and then 4-0, so they weren't looking that hot coming in. It was also the first time that a Chinese team had beaten a Korean team on in the later stages of a tournament. In fact, it may have been the first time ever. And GC Busan, the eventual winners, came 2nd place, actually, to Luxury Watch Red in Apex Challengers the season before. And we're looking like a reasonable team, but certainly not the powerhouse that they ended up being. So if we take a look at how the groups actually played out. So Group A was a strange one because it began with Lunatic High getting upset by MVP Space, who had a really good adaptation to Doomfist very early on, and really used that to what looked like at the time some of its fullest potential. Paired it with a Farah Mercy, and replaced kind of the normal Tracer on the floor with the Doomfist. Really disrupted Lunatic High. They didn't know how to deal with it, had a lot of difficulty there. Meta Athena just were the punching bags of this group, despite previously being in kind of Apex Season 2, a real team that looked like they had potential, kind of have fallen apart now that we've moved away from the more control, stable comps with Reinhardt, Zarya, that kind of stuff. Didn't really find their footing in this group at all. MVP Space a little bit fell off as well. They got decimated by Runaway, who were still playing very aggressive compositions, but were playing some very strange lineups for the team. So, for example, when Runaway actually got 3-0'd by Lunatic High, which I want to bring up because that's one of the losses that Runaway has, which makes you really question whether they deserve their run to the final. This is actually, I mean, OverGG's actually got it wrong. But if you take a look at this VOD here, this is quite convoluted. I wasn't really expecting to do this, but here we go. We're going to demonstrate why Runaway's early group stage losses are perhaps not as indicative of their talent as you might expect. Because they were experimenting with Runner a lot. And if you have a look at this, this roster that they're running up in the top left hand side, you can see that they've got Runner on Lucio instead of Janu, who ended up being their Lucio throughout most of it. Sorry, Bumper rather than Bumper. Man, I mix up this team because they changed around their roles so much. So they've got Cox on main tank, they've got Bumper on off tank, which was his former role. They've got Janu on flex support, and then they've got Haxel and Stitch. But this is just a strange lineup, the strange kind of roster that they were really experimenting with throughout a lot of the group stage before they found what worked for them, which was either you run Haxel on Lucio and Cox on Soldier if you want to run a Soldier Tracer kind of composition, which they looked okay at, but they didn't look incredible. And you'll notice that whenever they played in the later stages of the playoffs, and certainly every single time they had to play against GC Busan, the only composition that they could field that was kind of bringing that star power that they were able to play at the same tempo as GC Busan was this Genji Tracer where Cox goes back to the flex support and they have him paired up with Bumper, and then Janu's on the Diva. That was the roster that they ended up fixing with. But throughout all of these iterations, the team play was building, I think, which is something that Runner alluded to as well. One of the reasons that they were going for a lot of these weird looking compositions is because they were really building up their team synergy to the point where they felt like as soon as they had a good comp that clicked, they would be able to run with it. So that was the weird shit going on in Group A. And eventually it leads to Lunatic Kai and Runaway coming out as the top 2 of the group. Clearly the two best teams there, although MVP Space has still got upset potential, especially in this meta as well, where you'll see them going through APAC and they look like a very strong team. They are very fast to adapt to new metas, I think. They probably have very good coaching staff, actually. I think actually that the MVP Space coach just got picked up by Team Seoul. I could be wrong with that, but that rings a bell in the back of my mind. That's a news story that I'm not 100% sure on, though. But I think the MVP are kind of known for having good coaching staff, so I think they're good to adapt to new metas and got a good range of talent on the team. They know what to abuse and when. Group B was a little bit... perhaps a little odd. I don't know whether people were really expecting RX Foxes to come out like they had. They do have some good talent on their team. If you have a look, they were running with Somin Su for a lot of the early stage of the season, but Sashin's really somebody that impressed me with his Genji and his Pharah play later on in the season for sure. Hyok is an old WNV Korea player as well, and the coach for the team used to coach WNV Korea, who, if you're not familiar with them, were kind of dominating the Chinese scene. They went over to China and just wrecked everybody in China for a lot of the time, about starting from just under a year ago, kind of in November of 2016, up until March 2017, something like that. They were standout, just dominating everybody in China as a Korean team that moved over there. Anyway, Kongnu Panthera still looking great in that one. Started out by beating Uncia and then demolished the rest. They got a slightly easier group because Uncia still have to find their footing after being pillaged to make Kongnu Panthera that much better. And they just seem to... I think there's a meme in the Korean Overwatch actually about them just having kind of all the offcuts and leftovers from other teams. It's like... I think the Korean meme is something like, this is where you go when nobody else wants you, or something like that. But that's what it seems to embody. Kongdu Uncia is like, they're picking up bits and bobs from all over the place, and they don't really seem to have a structure. I think it's kind of the sister team problem, where they've got such a good first team that they really just want to build up Panthera rather than trying to have two good teams like they did do previously in kind of Apex Season 1 and 2. But yeah, RX Foxes were the team really to come out of this group looking decent, and they came up over Kongdu Uncia. Group C. Group C was one of the weirdest groups when you look back, actually, because Rockstalkers weren't doing that bad in Challenger. I believe... Actually, I don't want to talk shit. I think they came out in 3rd or something like that, though. I wonder how I would tell. 4th. Okay, so they came out in 4th. This was the Challenger season just before this season of Apex. Luxury Watch Red came out 1st. GC Busan 2nd. Rockstalkers 4th. And you can see that all 3 of them are actually in this group, so it was a very strange group, Group C. It was 3 teams with a lot of potential coming from challengers, but because 5 teams had been upgraded, obviously you have to put them somewhere within the groups, they all ended up being kind of centralized within Group C. It made for a bit of a strange group, especially when you look back, because Luxury Watch Red, with this great combo of Wicked and Nene as their DPS players, Wicked was very good at picking up the Doomfist very early on in this meta in the group stages, when it still had such a large hitbox on the Rocket Punch, and really was carrying them through a lot of their engagements against GC Busan. As well, GC Busan actually had a guy called Ariel playing on the Diva role, which you might recognize him because he was on the stage picking up the trophy and everything after they won the Apex Finals, but they actually didn't field him at all outside of the group stages, I believe. And instead they got Wu Hyal, who for my money is the best diva in Korea at the moment, which de facto makes you the best diva in the world. Because the Korean divas are way above everybody else anyway. But Wu Hyal is an absolute beast. When you watch him play, he facilitates so much of this team's play. The teamwork on GC Busan as they went through the playoffs was just unbelievable, and part of it was Wu Hyal being able to adapt and act as like an anchor for the whole of the rest of the team, being able to trade his health pool efficiently whenever Gesture's going in, so he gets in front of him to block the damage and peels for him as he's coming out, making sure that Gesture can get the maximum impact on the Winston, and also being able to keep key players alive. Particularly Hureg at times, rather than Haegopyeon, who they sometimes leave just out in the cold, so they'll just kind of ditch Haegopyeon and push forward and just win the fight anyway because the enemy team dives so hard on Haegopyeon at their flex support. But here they were playing it with Ariel. They hadn't quite adapted their style yet to this really nice, great teamwork, anti-dive strategy that they had as they went through playoffs with the Tracer Soldier 76. And they certainly hadn't showed any of the Genji Tracer that they only pulled out in the finals. And Luxury Watch Red kind of abused that. That was their only loss, was to Luxury Watch Red. And abused that by being able to get picks with the Doomfist whenever. And GC Busan play high tempo, but it's low time to kill their composition. It's not run in and dive, it's run in and play excellently as a team and try and force mistakes out of the enemy. And if Wiki keeps getting picks with the Doomfist, that style's mitigated somewhat. Freaka Freaks are also very interesting because now that they've revamped their roster in APAC, people might be wondering what happened to them in this group. But if you look at the roster that they actually fielded, they had lost Mano because Mano moved over to Luxury Watch, who then reportedly are going over to the is it New York? I think it's New York. Roster for Owl. And so they brought in Breck, who was on MVP Space, I believe. And they brought him in, and I hadn't really seen any talent coming out from Breck, so I was very curious as to Taerong's decision to bring him into this team. Didn't particularly perform. Kalios was decent on the Diva, but I don't think that he was quite at the same level of play, or perhaps the same level of synergy with his main tank as Donghyun was when they were playing with Mano in the previous season. And now they've kind of messed this all up because I believe I haven't watched too much of the APAC games. I should mention that, but I believe they're running like Jin on main tank now and Attune instead of Recry, so pretty interesting. And Ty Dollar as well is in there, so it's pretty interesting times for Freaka Freaks Blue. Actually, they're really messing stuff up, or as they're now known, Freaka Freaks. But this Group C was very interesting to me because they had you had 3 of the new challenger teams, and Luxury Watch Red were the only team to beat GC Busan apart from Runaway, who they later beat. Group D was by far the weakest group of the entirety of Apex, and in fact would have probably still, I mean, maybe Group C would have been the weakest group had Luxury Watch Blue actually played, but Luxury Watch Blue obviously dropped out at the beginning of Apex, unfortunately robbing people of that potential story, especially when they had Mano come in, and I believe they're still in Korea as well. It's not the case that they had to take time to adapt to North America, so they were brought over early or something. For whatever reason, perhaps whoever's running the New York spot just wanted to take them out of Apex because they didn't believe it was the best practice environment. That seems mental to me, honestly. But anyway, that's not what I'm supposed to be talking about. These guys dropped, so then it was a 3-horse race between X6, Conbox, and Metabellum. Metabellum really didn't look like they were a great team whatsoever. Conbox looked like they had some good moments, but X6 stayed with this consistent performance that they had done over the previous season as well, where they're just kind of a middling team in Korea. Conbox are much more up and down. Never know quite what to expect from them. They kind of come out with some weird performances, or sometimes look like they should have all the pieces to be able to become a stable tier 2 team, but then fall flat. But they managed to make it through anyway because Luxury Watch Blue dropped out. So those were the teams that ended up going through to the quarterfinals, and then when we switched onto the double Junkrat Mine and nerfed Doomfist, we saw some very interesting stuff in this kind of stage, in the quarterfinal stage. So Kongdu Panthera started out by just wrecking Conbox, and they go on to the upper bracket final and just wreck RX Foxes as well. So they're just through, no problem. Had a pretty easy bracket to be able to get through there. Would have been slightly more difficult perhaps if they faced LW Red, but the interesting thing about this LW Red team, I actually think that they're a better team overall than RX Foxes, but every single time they played, well, the 2 times that they played here, RX Foxes were able to get the better of them in incredibly close games, actually. Which went the other way when you look back at Challenger in the previous season. So RX Foxes have definitely fixed something there, or got a good read on LW Red. I think the Doomfist nerf also hurt LW Red as they came into these quarterfinals. But LW Red generally did look like the better team coming in, so I believe this was somewhat of an upset. But RX Foxes are still quite a decent team, a decent tier 2 team within Korea as well. But they obviously made it to the semi-finals as well, which was an unexpected result because they didn't look like the 4th best team in Korea. They didn't even look like the 5th or 6th, frankly. But that was just a factor of how this stage played out. So LW Red lose to RX Foxes. They're able to get the win over Conbox here. And then RX Foxes beat them again, despite LW Red looking pretty decent when they played against other teams. So it's Kongdu and RX Foxes that go through. Okay, fairly fine. Nothing really to say there other than LW Red potentially stronger team than this bracket would make them look. But when you move down to this one, I mean, this is where the nuts shit happened, right? And everyone knew it as soon as it happened. So Runaway kind of grind out a 3-2 game over X6 where the MO of Runaway all the way through up until this game. So the MO of Runaway during the groups and during this game was to try and swap their compositions up as much as possible by putting players into different roles, even mid-map, to knock the other team off balance or to be able to react very quickly. I mean, there are fundamental problems to playing the game in this way, which is why Overwatch is difficult. It's like difficult to mesh the two worlds of Overwatch. Like, oh, we should swap in this instance because the composition is better for this stage of the map or whatever. And it's like, uh-oh, you have ultimates and it's not a good idea to swap right now because then they'll get a snowball against you. Or, uh-oh, you have players where if you put them into positions like this, they can no longer carry, for example, Haxel and Lucio. So whenever they play like their Pharah Mercy composition, where Cox is on the Pharah and Haxel's on the Lucio, or this Soldier 76 Tracer, where exactly the same thing happens, except Cox is on the Soldier 76, and then they go back to Genshi Tracer, they're swapping things around quite a lot. But they managed to find two or three base compositions and base switches that worked for them. They're able to come out with a victory here over X6, but this still isn't Runaway at their kind of true power. Really, the only composition that Runaway was at an elite level at was this Genshi Tracer composition, which they've run in the past and they looked incredible at, and they were one of the best dive teams when you move back to Apex Season 2, but they've been trying to work on their teamwork, and part of that, I think, was getting people comfortable on other roles so that they knew what to expect from the other players when they're playing those roles. So like, if you've had experience playing as a Lucio and seen things from the Lucio's point of view, then you understand a bit more how the team as a whole works rather than just your individual role in it. I think is probably the mentality of where Runner was trying to go with this. But as things got later, as things went into the actual playoff bracket and for this upper final, they went very much for just the Genshi Tracer compositions. But here, I mean, here's the nuts shit, because at this point, GC Busan took a shit on Lunatic High's chest, and I don't think many people were really expecting that. And so there was a lot of people saying Lunatic High's DPS underperformed, because this is the one where they were playing with what's his fucking name? Lee Tae-jun. This is the one where they were playing with Lee Tae-jun on the Tracer. He didn't look like he was really holding his weight that well. They were having difficulties getting picks in certain situations, but also there was just a fundamental collapse of their teamwork, I think. GC Busan played at such a high tempo by just constantly initiating into them. Even when they're playing with this anti-dive comp, they're pushing into situations where they're applying so much pressure to Lunatic High so quickly that they just couldn't perform in that kind of a high tempo game and utterly collapsed. I mean, this was poor performances in both of these games. Both of them are 3-0 from GC Busan over Lunatic High. Massive upsets. I mean, if you haven't seen these games, you have to rewatch them as well. Particularly this one, I think, in the lower final tells the best story, because Lunatic High are normally such a great team at being able to adapt and respond to what other teams are throwing at them in previous games. There is no team apart from Luxury Watch Red a really long time ago and now GC Busan that have ever beaten Lunatic High twice. I mean, that is just fucking nuts. Take a look at this. Lunatic High, you look at their match page, you go all the way back to the beginning. They lost Rogue APAC Grand Finals when they'd already beaten them twice. Okay, fair enough. Rogue have never beaten them again. Have they ever had a chance to play them again? Yeah, they have in the group stages of Apex Season 3. Kongdu Unsea beat them when the meta had just all shifted, and they beat them 3-0. That was the time when Envious won. Kongdu Unsea have never beaten them again. Here, Luxury Watch Red beat them and have beaten them again. No, they did. They beat them another time, but it's not actually recorded here. But it was a totally different iteration of Luxury Watch Red, I believe. And then Runaway beat them, Conde Panthera beat them. These teams have never beaten them ever again. GC Busan are the only team to beat them, apart from Luxury Watch Red, a long time ago with two completely different rosters. GC Busan are the only team to beat Lunatic High twice, kind of, not even consecutively, just twice. They're the only team to have beaten them twice, apart from LW Red with totally different rosters. So, for this game, it was crazy to see that Lunatic High weren't able to adapt at all to GC Busan's unrelenting aggression with a composition that normally plays lower tempo than the Genshi Tracer dive comps. And it was a nuts performance from GC Busan, and right from right from these games, I mean, I can't say that I called it early by any stretch of the imagination that GC Busan were going to be like the Apex winners. And actually, I even joked just after having looked, because I was working the Contenders playoffs at the time, and so didn't have a chance to watch any of the VODs. Actually, joked with Monty, like, yeah, they'll beat Lunatic Eye 3-0, but Kongdu Panthera will crush them, don't worry. And then they crush Kongdu Panthera as well as they move into the next round. But when you look back over the VODs, like when I was actually looking at the VODs, even here, and definitely here, you can tell that GC Busan's teamwork and the pace that they're actually playing at is a lot higher than any other team in the competition, apart from Runaway on certain maps when it's favored for Genji Tracer dive, are able to still play at the same tempo, and Haxal had an unreal performance and was able to come away with the win there in this game. So crazy performances over here. X6, I think, did well for themselves. This is reasonably where you'd expect them to finish. Lunatic Eye obviously underperforming. Now they've made some changes over, and Runaway getting the win over here, but eventually falling, obviously, in the playoff finals. So when you came to the finals, GC Busan 4-0'd Cloud9 Kongdu as well. This was not close. This was a 4-0 within 1 hour of gameplay. This was an unbelievable stomping. This was, they picked apart Cloud9 Kongdu with far superior teamwork. I mean, just leagues above. The DPS players on Cloud9 Kongdu couldn't get anything done because Wu Xiao was able to peel all the time, and also Closer had an outrageous performance. Just every time Rascal or Birdring are trying to get into them, they deal with them, and they also just push forwards and obliterate them with like super crisp executed wipes of the team. They're not even, I mean, sometimes they're dives. The interesting thing about how GC Busan play is that they have a kind of echoes of this counter dive play when they want to run it. They're a very well-rounded team, so even though they can completely bait, like put tons of pressure on you, bait a dive out and then kill it, they can also get themselves into positions, if Gesture's there early, where he can drop down and completely mess up the dive, and then they just obliterate everybody. So somebody jumps in, say it's Fisher who jumps in, the rest of his team wants to help him, but Jester just drops down from somewhere above, still has tons of time to zap all of you so that you can't actually move forward, and then he'll be able to disengage and help the rest of his team kill Fisher, so that gives him an early pick and then they push forwards. This kind of stuff. They also have the ability to do counter dives with Gesture and Prophet, because Prophet's so unbelievably nuts on Tracer and then Genji in the final that he can just kind of dive on his own and doesn't really need a 3-man dive like a lot of teams do with Wu Xiao. So they have the ability to just go for these 2-man dives while they have a 4-man at the back that's still good enough to protect them, while Prophet and Gesture wreck everybody. I mean, it was just an absolute clinic from GC Busan. Some of the best teamwork I've ever seen in Overwatch, and it was a pleasure to watch. And then, obviously, I mean, RX Foxes kind of looked their way through having the much easier side of the quarterfinals, and then just get obliterated by Runaway and Cloud9 Kongdu here. They still have a good showing for themselves, but I wouldn't say that RX Foxes are above Luxury Watch Red, perhaps not above a team like X6 at the moment as well, maybe not even above MVP Space. Difficult to tell, actually, because they just kind of jumped straight onto the new meta after being obliterated in the, after being beaten in the group stages of this season. But I wouldn't say that RX Foxes are on the same level as these guys. There was a clear top 3 in Apex this season. And there was a clear distinction, top 4, because obviously there's Lunatic Eye is clearly within the top 4 of Korea right now. But there was a clear distinction, actually, between the two, between the best team this time and everybody else. The finals were an unbelievable game. Again, Runaway is the only team in Korea at the moment that can play at the same tempo while still being able to keep everything structured. Runaway seem like they've really worked on that aspect of their gameplay so that they can play really fast, still manage a lot of different things going on, but keep the timing really excellent with how they're using the abilities. A couple of problems with their ultimates, but in general, the fact that they're able to go 3-4 and at times look like they were going to beat GC Busan is credit to them. But GC Busan just simply couldn't be stopped this season. They're so good. And for this grand final, they played a composition pretty much the entire time that they had never played before at all throughout the whole of the rest of the tournament. They played Genji Tracer, where they put Prophet over on the Genji, And Prophet had an unbelievable performance on the Genji, just absolutely destroying people, outplaying Haxel magnificently, but Haxel was completely countered by GC Busan. That was another thing that they did so well, was completely shut down Haxel and also enable Prophet to do all of this stuff. Again, just the teamwork behind GC Busan is by far their greatest asset, which means that for teams that are trying to potentially pull them apart for Overwatch League, I mean, there is a rumor now that they've been signed. I think Alec has posted something on Twitter saying that they've been signed by another Korean team that already had 6, which, given that Seoul has already got 8 players, must be either Cloud9 or the Luxury Watch team. But if you're going to try and pick these guys apart, I think a couple of people are trying to sign Prophet at various times. I mean, Prophet's a beast, but all of the other people really rely on that teamwork from GC Busan to be able to make these kind of results happen. So that was Apex in a nutshell.